Good afternoon. It is so good to have you here with me for another virtual book signing. Today I'm doing the Vellum Papers, and this is my novel, and it is family friendly. You know, we're in times where a lot of people have much more time on their hands, and they're in the house with family a lot more. And I am pushing the reading and the buying of books. This is a great time to embellish your collection, especially a book for the family, a book that you can just have story time with the entire group. The Vellum Papers was written for children and youth, and it is also something that will hold the interest of any adult that likes a good old-fashioned story. The Vellum Papers is a novel, and it's over 300 pages. So if you buy this, you will be reading for quite a while for story time with your family. It is literary fiction, and I'm going to read the synopsis on the back. It says, The Vellum Papers is a tale of crescendos and decrescendos of life. It begins ever so lightly as the central figure begins her path of knowledge by starting kindergarten. She is eager and full of expectations as she floats through daily activities that present her with opportunities to embrace life full throttle. Though she is young, her naivete does not protect her from conflict with people, nature, and illness. Renee also discovers an antagonist is on her heels. She is guarding a secret from her grandfather, and it has endangered her. Her dark dreams clue her in, and she struggles to the end to survive. And I have a number of endorsers on the back. I'll read what they are saying about this book. One is Andy Hamilton of the Niles Daily Star. He says this author has taken her bounty of memories and combined them with a lot of imagination to pen her book. Another is a college professor. He writes, it is said that great literature appears to be those that successfully assume a burden of cultural importance Great literature attempts not just the exploration of particular people and places, real or imaginary, but also the illumination of epochs, community, and of a particular society itself. The family is not only its setting, but becomes its subject. Gail Burrell writes great literature. And then I have Robert Britton, who is an MD. He has given me an overview. It says the Vellum Papers feature a refreshing departure from the contemporary concentration on drugs, violence, and sex. It is a story that anyone in a family could read and enjoy. Congratulations to Mrs. Gail Burrell Pearson on a work that is well done. So we are so glad for the endorsements that I have, and the Vellum Papers, it is in a number of schools. I have lectured at schools, and they have bought, some have bought library sets, and others have just made it a requirement for the students in their reading classes and English classes. I've lectured with this book at elementary schools, secondary schools, and also colleges and universities. So today I have a review just in from a teacher that was using it for her entire classroom. She says, I'm an elementary classroom teacher, and I just went through the Vellum Papers with my entire class. This novel quickly became the highlight of our day. Not only were the characters lively and entertaining, the plot was gripping, and the setting was painted vividly in the minds of my students. I can't end this review without praising the extraordinary use of vocabulary in this book. It pushed even my advanced students to a higher level of language. I have recommended the Vellum Papers to my colleagues more times than I can count. So we thank our classroom teacher for that. The Vellum Papers has 13 chapters. The first one is called Fond Memories. The second, Pancho the Killer Dog. Third, The Haunted House. The fourth, Halloween Night. The fifth, The Greyhound Bus. The sixth, Papa's Party. The seventh, The Piano Lesson. 8, A Purple Tongue. 9, The Ice Princess. 10, A Peep Through the Keyhole. 11, A Burglary at My House. 12, The Christmas Annual. And 13 is the Vellum Papers. Author's note. Down through the years as an educator, my classroom students love to listen to my prose and poetry. They prefer them over textbook material. I think the young people, along with my college professors, were some of my greatest fans. So much of the literature today is centered in violence and perversion. Statistics tell us what a young person reads and watches has a direct bearing on their behavior. I know all who read the Vellum Papers will enjoy moving through a time period that is very entertaining and family friendly. The introduction says, a little girl has one of the biggest experiences of her life mingled with discovering high anxiety, death, dark dreams, and imminent danger. If she survives, her reward might be greater than anyone in her family can dream or imagine. This book can be purchased from Amazon.com. It is under G.R. Pearson Burrell. Or you can go to my website, Gayle, Gayle, Burrell, BURREL, .com. And it is also on my Facebook, Gayle Burrell at Facebook. You'll have information there. And if you want to order a hard copy, because I have it on ebooks, if you want to order a hard copy, just follow the directions on both the website and the Facebook. So we will begin by reading snippets from each chapter. Not each chapter, probably 3 or 4 chapters out of 13. And we will begin with chapter 1. It is called Fond Memories. It had been an ordinary summer, and this night was like the rest. I pretended to be asleep. Mama gave the order, and Daddy moved right on target as he picked me up with the utmost caution. After all, I was the baby of the family. Though I had grown so large, he now gave a slight grunt as he threw my relaxed body over my shoulders. He turned the corner, and I opened my eyes with great precision, just enough to be able to see without disturbing the natural look of closed eyelids. I almost blew the whole deal as my body trembled with excitement. Daddy was about to ascend the steep stairwell with the speed of greased lightning, with my head hanging over his shoulders. It always felt like the first turn of a great Ferris wheel. The stairs were so steep and long that by the time we reached the top, I was giggling uncontrollably. Without fail, Mama always hollered, "Walter, slow down before you have an accident and break you and that child into little pieces." Daddy would enter my little attic bedroom that always made him appear as one of the Amalekites. This was the name of giants from the Bible. Sister Blackamore taught me this in my primary Sunday school class. Our class was called the Little Friends of Jesus. My dad's head touched the ceiling. If he went further into the room where my bed was, he would have to stoop as he tossed me into the bed. Fully aware that he had been bamboozled by the baby, Daddy would cover me up and clear his throat a time or two to unleash the softest tone that his heavy, gruff voice would allow and say, "Night, night, Snoop." Of course, I never answered because I was already fast asleep. He would leave and even tiptoe down the stairs. The next morning, I awakened to the sound of one of my siblings beating on the bathroom door. And I'm going to leave off right there. And we'll go to chapter 2, Pancho the Killer Dog. It was a Sunday morning. And when I came out of the bathroom, my oldest brother, Walter Jr., was standing there in his bedclothes and a pair of 3-inch red leather pumps. Before I could say, "Jimmy Crackcorn," he said, "Shut up and move." I knew Mama had forced him to stretch out her shoes again before church services. I just wish my feet were long and wide enough for such an easy pocket full of money. She always paid him a full $2 to stumble all over the house and scuff her shoes on whatever got in his way. Mommy had every colored shoe that ever came out, and she kept exactly 2 pairs in the closet and switched the colors every day. That way my daddy never knew the mountain of shoes Mama possessed because he was colorblind. He didn't pay attention to detail either. It was unseasonably warm, so everyone dressed rather quickly in simple clothing except for Daddy. He still had on a white shirt, buttoned up to his throat, with a skinny knotted tie held in place by a gold bar. He was sweating already, and we hadn't even left the house. When Daddy turned the corner, our church was at the end of the street. It was a small and built on an incline that made it look like it was on a mountain. It was kept snow white by the deacons, who painted it annually. You had to walk up a steep set of steps to enter the sanctuary. There were 2 sets of doors you had to pass through in order to be seated. It was early, and I was standing in the front porch with my new spring coat on. It was lightweight, and it provided warmth from the slight chills of a golden autumn. Let's see. I was really afraid to go into the living room because the house was quieter than usual for this time of evening. I didn't know who had been hurt or even, God forbid, killed by Pancho or the man who shot the gun. I was so worried I was still sucking my thumb. Pierre must have sensed my anxiety because he was meowing for me to pick him up. His insistence confirmed that something really had gone very wrong. Pierre always acted like a blood member of the family. Whenever we were sad, he was too. If there was joy in the house, Pierre was always right smack dab in the middle of it. He was licking my face when suddenly there was a loud crackle and a low groan. A rumble actually shook the house. The whole night turned a jewel-toned blue that flashed several times. Pierre fled so swiftly that my arms were still in a hold position without him. I looked so ridiculous in the blue light that when Irma passed me, she did a double take. She shook me. I suppose she thought I had been struck by lightning. When I stepped up into the living room, Mama was still on the phone. This was highly unusual because Mama was known to yell at people all around the house who talked on the phone while there was a rainstorm. I didn't see Jeff, Walter, or Daddy, and this made me nervous. Maybe they had all been injured. I couldn't remember how many shots I had heard. Mama finally spoke. When she began, her eyebrows became one. She made her lips tight like a pulled rubber band. She argued, "Well, Mr. Howard, all I know is my son's leg was mauled very seriously. 4 other children from this neighborhood were injured too. They all had to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. They received a shot in their navel for rabies. Those poor children had to get stitches too. Pardon me if I don't offer any condolences for your monster of a mad dog. And yes, I'm grateful to Sergeant Jackson." By this time, my father had entered shirtless from the basement. Irma asked, "Could you get the blood out, Daddy?" He responded. Daddy made a silent motion to Mom by shaking his head and slightly raising both hands simultaneously. Mama read his movements and she said, "Well, Mr. Howard, I'm glad Sergeant Jackson was there with his rifle. It seems I've changed my mind about men owning hunting guns." My dad gave a crooked smile and Mom hung up without saying goodbye. And we'll leave that chapter 2. On to the chapter 3, the haunted house. Halloween was less than a week away, and the excitement of it all was building. All of our stories at school dealt with ghosts and goblins. Our snack time now included dainties with pictures made of frosting, orange pumpkins and green witches with black hats riding brooms. Mrs. Northwood had covered all the bulletin boards with orange and black construction paper. They looked like checkerboard squares. All the students were cutting out the classic figures that belonged in a Halloween scene. This time of year always made Pierre jumpy because his beautiful black coat seemed to evoke a whole new set of responses, especially when we walked around our neighborhood. Once I heard a lady scream in a blood-curdling manner when she saw Pierre walk across her front lawn. She ran into the house and got some table salt and sprinkled it exactly where poor Pierre had walked across the grass. Mama said she was a Southerner and full of silly superstitions, and this was her way of reversing the curse. Halloween was not always fun and games in our neighborhood. Sometimes the things people did or said would cause you to look under beds and check closets before you went to sleep. This was the part that made me wish we could just skip the holiday altogether. On top of this, autumn's days were getting shorter and the encroaching darkness just seemed to swallow normality. It always made me feel like the night was sneaking up behind me, which is probably why parents didn't have to look for their children during Halloween season. Kids just kind of gathered themselves up and into their homes before nightfall. I was doing a chalked hopscotch on the sidewalk when I heard our car making and starting up the noise. It was rolling backward down the driveway. And I'm going to skip ahead to more pages, through more pages. Before I went to bed, I made sure I prayed a nice long prayer. Jeff and I had watched Count Dracula after supper, and it left me feeling a little creepy. Everything seemed to be screeching and creaking. The floor said eerie things. The door moaned, and now my bed had come to life. I was sure I'd seen a pair of glowing eyes in the corner of the room. I had to get up and investigate. And we're going to move ahead. My teacher, Mrs. Northwood, had talked about these apples, and I told Daddy everything she taught us and about Johnny Appleseed and the Indians, and I couldn't believe Daddy remembered. He polished it on his sleeve, and he handed it to me before he could say, and I'll skip ahead. The next day, my friends asked why I didn't meet them at the house next to the haunted house as we had planned, and I gave them a wide grin that exposed the large gutted out hole in my gums. Everybody sort of frowned, and Fran said, "Gosh, baby, you kind of look like those jack-o'-lanterns that are on everybody's front steps," Barbie added. "It's good you're wearing that beautiful princess outfit for Halloween. Fran, what are you going to be?" "I'm going as Spider-Woman," Fran began. "My mom made me my outfit. She even made me a giant spider web." "What about you, Barbie?" "I'm going to be a robot. My sister is using painted bags for my outfit." "Well, I'm going to be a giant sunflower," said Leslie. "My grandma is sewing a costume for me." Before we knew it, we were on the playground, and we were slightly early. So we all got on the monkey bars and hung upside down like hangworms until the bell rang. At the end of the school day, my friends rescheduled the meeting at the haunted house. The plan remained pretty much the same. We were supposed to ride our bikes to the house that was next door to this house, fill our pockets with gravel from the driveway, and ride as close as we could. Next, we were to throw the stones at the old place and wait to see if there were any signs of Patty Davis. It was a piece of cake, a great plan that Fran had put together. After supper, I helped Irma clear the table, and then I zoomed out of the back door and jumped on my bicycle, and I was on my way to the meeting. When I arrived, the girls already had their pockets and the straw baskets in the front of their bikes filled with gravel. Fran was tossing her hair and giving us hand signals to pair up. We all lined up accordingly. And she rolled her bicycle to the front of the line and gave a war cry that was antagonistic and hostile. The others did the same thing, and we were off. We rode our bikes in a fury. The wind was clipping our faces. And as I looked around, ponytails, floating curls, and spring jackets were all airborne and full of wind. We were skydivers that had been dropped from an enemy warplane. And I'll skip ahead to chapter 4, called Halloween Night. We were seated on the large circular braided rug in Mrs. Northwood's room. She was reading a story about Jack and the Beanstalk. The book was very large and colorful, and the covers were glossy. Every time she finished reading a page, she would turn the book around and let us see the bright illustrations. I believe it was my class's favorite time of day, story time. At the end of our class, Mrs. Northwood read off all of the safety rules for trick-or-treating that night. She reminded us to hold our parents' hands and not to cross the street alone. The most important rule, she reminded us, was not to eat any of the candy until we arrived home, so that our parents could inspect each and every piece. I thought that rule, even though the most important, would be very hard to stick to. The afternoon had dragged along, and it was finally time to get dressed for trick-or-treating. All of the neighborhood children had been running up and down the streets, talking to each other about what kind of costume they had. And I'm going to skip ahead. Groups of 10 to 15 kids would run up to a door and shout, "Trick-or-treat!" And an adult would open the door and place candy in each of our bags. If the trick-or-treater was not too large, they would frown and give all the little ones some first. Some of the parents, outright refused to give candy to the really big kids. This was not good. The bad ones would wait until the little ones collected a bag full of candy, and then they would snatch it. But we would always share with the poor kid who was victimized. Skipping ahead. Suddenly they were screaming and being a real nuisance when the adults in the crowd began to rebuke them for their behavior. Josh Bell was among the group, and he was the fiercest. He felt the need to take it further, so he ran up to Sergeant Jackson's door and rang the doorbell. He screamed, "Trick or treat, smell my feet, give me something good to eat." Suddenly there was a rumble and a clang. Things seemed to be falling inside the cluttered porch. The boys were now standing in front of a crowd with their mouths open. The infamous Josh Bell was hiding under a large pile of leaves, with only the whites of his eyes showing. The sergeant snatched the door open, and as it turned on the squeaky hinges, a tall, imposing figure decorated with a double-barreled shotgun stood in the shadow of his doorway. As soon as people could distinguish what the sergeant held in his hand, they scurried in every direction. Jeff and I were holding hands, but somehow we got separated. The crowd was leaving me, so I grabbed a piece of material hanging from the turban of the genie, and he was moving very rapidly, and I held on to the ample material as if it were the reins of a horse. When he whisked past my house, I released this life-saving cord. Mom and Dad were standing out on the steps, and they wanted to know what on earth was going on. I'm skipping ahead. On the way home that day, I noticed a lot of cars parked in front of my house. On the opposite side of the street, I recognized most of the cars because they belonged to my brothers and sisters. No one had mentioned a special event, so I wondered what in tarnation was going on. When I got to the front door, my Uncle Jules swung the screen door open for me and said, "How's my little buttercup today?" "Just fine, Uncle Jules. I love my new school," I reported. "Why are you all here today?" "Well, we received a telegram saying that Papa was not doing well." "Not well at all." And my uncle's eyes actually watered up. And when he said this, and I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 5, the Greyhound Bus. The next morning, I woke up to a gentle shaking. "Get up, baby, get up." Slowly, I realized it was Mama. She was standing over me fully dressed, and she had a stack of fresh clothing. With 2 towels on top, I looked out the window, and it was still dark. She said, "Shh, it's too early to waken the others." "What time is it?" I said, and she answered, 4 a.m. Come on and let me get you washed and dressed. Your daddy will be driving us to the bus station very quickly. Our bus leaves at 5. I looked in the corner for my express ride, but Mama grabbed my arm and didn't let go until we were in the bathroom. I hated it when she washed me up because everything burned and tingled after she was done. I felt like she scrubbed things that really didn't need a scrub, but this was Mama's way. She could make a kid look perfect from head to toe, totally spit shine, as Daddy would say. This would always make me feel unnatural, and when I tried to be myself, it never worked. I couldn't run, jump, or play in the yard. This look was for standing in front of adults only and nothing else. This was how I was going to look today. I could already tell. Sure enough, when Mama was finished, I had on tiny pearl earrings, a pink cotton dress with a lacy pinafore overlay, white bobby socks, and my black patent leather shoes. Mama handed me a pair of pink dress gloves on my way out of the door and said, "You can't touch dirty things with your dress gloves on, young lady." And I said, "Yes, Mama." Daddy was in the car, and I scooted to the middle and laid my hand on Daddy as he drove. Mama said, "Yes, you are a rotten little thing," and then she smiled. We were soon at the station, and I could smell a very strong smell as we sat in our car. When I wrinkled the top of my nose, Daddy said, "That's diesel fuel, Snoop. It's going to take you where you need to go." And he smiled. "Look up at that old greyhound dog. Do you see him?" Daddy repeated. Mama said, "We don't have much time, Walter. Please get our baggage, and I'll go check us in." When she left, I said, "Daddy, why can't you go?" "Please go, Daddy." "Well, Snoop, it's like this. I have to go to work, and you have a big family like ours. The dad can't miss work. Then he hugged me and gave me a nickel. I went into the bus station and bought a Hershey bar and put it in my purse. I waved to Daddy as our bus pulled off. Mama let me sit next to the window, and I waved until Daddy got so small I couldn't see his hand. The bus was a double-decker bus. This meant that there were seats on the upper level. There was even a bathroom on the bus. This bus made a really loud rumbling noise, but once we were going so fast that everything we passed seemed to be snatched away, the rumbling noise turned into a very low drone that made you sit back, ball up, and go to sleep. The sun had been warming up our side of the bus for several hours. I opened my purse, and my Hershey bar was warm and mushy. I looked at Mama to offer her some, but she was sleeping. So I struggled to open it with my pink gloves on. There was nothing like the taste of chocolate to me. Though it was soft, it was creamy and smooth, and it made me smack and suck the chocolatey tips of my pink dress gloves. When I was done, Mama woke up and took one look at me and covered both of her eyes with her hands. She said, "I don't believe it." We're going to leave that there. And I'm going to the chapter called The Ice Princess, in the middle of the book. The Ice Princess. I could smell Mama's cream of wheat as I picked out my school clothes and rushed to get into the bathroom. I had to get on my little footstool to get up to the sink. I brushed my teeth and checked them over in the mirror to make sure they were white and shiny. It was hard to believe I had been so ill over the weekend, and sad to think I had worms inside of me. This was something I decided I would not share with my buddies or my classmates. There was so much snow that the city looked surreal. Our trek to school was like running through an igloo. Sounds were muffled. There was packed snow with little tiles of broken ice under our feet and walls of snow as far as you could see. The children looked like mummies. They were wrapped from head to toe, and it was difficult to recognize people. Snow was piled dangerously high, and it was mingled with jagged pieces of ice. Suddenly, all the playground equipment had lost its appeal as the children gathered like a colony of little worker ants to behold Mount Everest, created right before their own little eyes. As everyone wondered in amazement what we were going to do with that great toy, the little boy from my kindergarten class, who was smaller than all the other boys, stepped forward and said, "This is Mount Sinai, and I am king of the mountain." Though he was small in stature, his mouth was second to none. Edward had red hair, and since no one in our class had red hair but him, no one called him Edward. He simply was known as Red. Now, Red loved to talk and boss people around. His large teeth that hung past his top lip seemed to give him an edge. Then he tilted his more than generous head back to briskly give his orders. People lined up and they charged up cyanide one by one. And he commanded. There, perched on the highest peak of this mount, was King Red and two of his very closest friends. They were total slaves to King Red, of course. Their goal was to push everyone off who made it to the top. But after a while, the order fell apart, and hundreds of kids charged up the mountain and knocked the king and his men off. All of the children laughed while sliding up and down this slick hillside until the bell rang. During the bell, many of the children ran to their designated areas. Part of the crowd ran around Sinai, and some of the teachers were running too. Something had happened, but the teachers who were standing in front of their class lines led their students into the schools. Heads were turning towards Sinai, trying desperately to see what had happened. When we entered the hallway, kids were whispering, and the noisy ones were yelling, "What happened? What happened?" No one seemed sure. I looked around for Red because even if he didn't know what happened, he would have something interesting to say about it. Mrs. Northward had gotten her wraps off, and she was standing in front of our open door saying, "Good morning, boys and girls," over and over. Mrs. North would always dress for the holidays. She had already engaged her festive spirit by dressing in red from head to toe, with the exception of her white tights. This made her pale skin look even paler against her candy red outfit. Her white hair stood out equally. It was teased like a poof of cotton candy. Mrs. Northwood's nails were painted red too. The bulletin board was vibrant, and it had a scene of 3 wise men. And I'm going to skip ahead. As I snored, I wiped the beads of perspiration from my forehead and took a deep breath and picked up the icicles as fast as I could. If I could get them all up, no one would blame me for the narrow box of Christmas tree trim. They would assume someone had put it away incorrectly. Father came out of the bedroom with a blanket wrapped around him. He was sipping the tea Mother had made. He walked past the dining room and into the living room. He had entered the living room to sit and watch the evening news. I went over and sat on his lap. I was so tired. I started sucking my thumb and I drifted off to sleep. As I snored, I was queen again. My locks were glistening silver. I was wearing a ball gown that was encrusted with gold and diamonds. I had 1,000,000 subjects in my kingdom. Sir Pierre informed me his crown was similar to mine, and he had a small shawl my mother had knitted him for in the most intricate pattern she possessed. His tail had a basket weave sleeve on it that made it stand erect. Pierre's head was high as he marched beside me. He also had a handlebar mustache that protruded from the sides of his face. As we moved through the kingdom, people were throwing rose petals at my feet. We moved along. The kingdom was not as bright and quickly turned dusk. Many faces were now indistinguishable as Sir Pierre looked up at me, sensing my uneasiness. "My lady, are you all right?" he asked. "Someone is following us, Pierre." "Yes, I've known it for some time," he retorted. "What are we going to do?" Sir Pierre did not answer, but he drew closer to me. We now enter a room where the stalagmites are as large as trees. Though it is now dark, they are still radiant in the ice kingdom. They are silver and amber, and they shoot straight up toward the roof of the kingdom. They are interesting enough to watch for hours on end, but Sir Pierre reminds me that we must get to my inner chambers for safety. He asked me to let him carry my treasure box. This golden trinket box is laden with several precious stones, jasper, sardonyx, and chalcedony. When I unstrapped the box that was bound to my chest, everyone in this section of the Ice Kingdom let out a sigh. Sir Pierre stood directly in front of me, anxiously waiting to receive what no other individual was allowed to touch, without paying the ultimate penalty, which was to be beheaded. Sir Pierre blinked his eyes slowly as he leaned forward to retrieve it. A voice from behind boomed, "Give it to me now." There was a man who flew down from the magnificent stalactites, draped in a black hooded cape. He had the ability to swoop up and down. He could not be apprehended by my mighty men. He circled, and he was coming toward us at a high speed. "He's after the treasure box," I yelled. But Sir Pierre said, "Queen of Ice, he is after the vellum papers that are contained inside your royal treasure box." "But those are from my grandfather. Why does he want that?" "They are very important," Sir Pierre said in a very deep and serious voice. As the black-caped men flew closer, I could see there was no face inside of the hood, but there were grotesque hands dangling from the black sleeves of the cape. They looked 1,000 years old. They were gnarled and white, and looked more like giant bird claws than human hands. His nails were razor sharp, and whenever he clawed at me, he would slash my dress from seam to seam. Sir Pierre gathered the bottom of my gown with his mouth, and he said, Run for your life. Queen of Ice, run. And I will not read more of The Ice Princess. Truly, this book is interesting. And it has many turns and corners. And it deals with dreams. And it's a lot. And that's great for you because you can read for a very long time. You can read it in increments with your family, with your students. Thank you for your time today. I hope you will order the Vellum Papers. It is a great book to have in your library. Again, just go to my website, gailburrell.com, or Gail Burrell Facebook. And you're able to order an ebook on there, or you're able to order a hard copy. And if you want a hard copy, just follow the directions. Have a wonderful day.